To be totally honest with you, Mike Grundy doesn't have a lot of good quotables from Oklahoma State, but the one that still sticks out and resonates to this day is, "I'm a man! I'm 40!
I'm a man! I'm 40!
And Matt, in this fight, Jacare Souza, for now, is 40, but when the fight takes place, he's going to be 41, or I guess as we record this, he's still 40, so we can still use the Mike Grundy quotable. He's going to be taking on the much younger man in Kevin Holland, who's coming in on short notice, replacing Marvin Vettori, and there's so many different layers to this fight. I mean, the fact that Kevin Holland, listen, this guy's fought, it seems like every other weekend. And so far in 2020, we look at the wins. I mean, Anthony Hernandez, Joaquin Buckley. Then he fights Darren Stewart, beats him in a split decision. Then he beats Charlie Ontiveros. Has anybody checked in on Charlie Ontiveros to see if he's
weird
all right?
Fight, but Kevin Holland was winning up until the point that Ontiveros got hurt. But it was a weird fight.
It was a weird fight, and Ontiveros with his Krusty the Clown hair, it was just way too weird of a call-up. So let's call a spade a spade. Some of Kevin Holland's wins are weird, but so are his losses. I mean, you look at the Brendan Allen loss, he had him cracked, he had him bleeding, and then they kind of tussled a little bit in the second round, and Brendan Allen submits him. The other loss, a short notice call-up into the UFC at 205 against Thiago Santos, in a fight where Kevin Holland took every ounce of punishment that Santos could give at him, and he didn't give up.
Talk shit back to him, actually. It was the exact opposite. Kevin Holland is a really weird fighter, and of course we have to mention he was supposed to be fighting Jack Hermansson on last weekend's card, but then got taken off due to a positive COVID test, and now fighting Jacare. So hopefully everything's good now. Hopefully we get the same version of Kevin Holland that we kind of know and love. And Holland has been one of those... He's not a Sean O'Malley prospect, but he's definitely more hyped up than your regular prospect. And of course, this matchup, and of course, the main event last weekend shows that. Kevin Holland, at the start of his career, I wasn't sold on him. I can be very open about that. He's a rangy striker. He talked a lot of crap, but he never really backed it up all that well. And after the run that he's been on, you can say what you want about some of the fighters who he has beaten, but I do think you have to look at the performance and not always just the opponent. And the fact that Kevin Holland's going out there and basically he can out-grapple you, he can out-strike you. I really like his striking too, because he's not a guy who's going to throw those big looping shots like we had seen from Jack Hermansson. When Hermansson got tired, he was kind of throwing those slapping punches. With Kevin Holland, he keeps everything very down the middle, very straight, very good at using his range too. He is going to catch you at the end of his shots. He's not going to give you any extra space that you don't deserve. And I think against a guy like Jacare, who is very leg kick heavy and very wrestling heavy, that's going to be a huge advantage for Holland.
With Kevin Holland, too, we talk about it a lot with Fight Night Picks. The guy's got a lot of whip at the end of his shots, but Kevin Holland is one of those fighters, and he's so unorthodox and fluid in his striking as well. The other thing that you have to be careful of, and Jacare doesn't, but most people do, Kevin Holland, a black belt in jiu-jitsu, under Travis Lutter, which you might think, I remember that guy, right?
Didn't he get submitted by Anderson Silva?
Well, he did, but he is definitely one of those under-the-radar, low-key, really good coaches out there, and he's really mentored Kevin Holland in a great way. Holland coming into the biggest fight of his career and going from Ontiveros, who was a career welterweight, taking a fight at middleweight on short notice and got wrecked, to Jacare Souza, Strikeforce Elite. Now, I get it. Jacare in his last 5 fights hasn't been the best run, but it's been a weird run. He beats Derek Brunson and finishes him, and I'll come back to that one. Loses a split decision to Kelvin Gastelum, beats Chris Weidman, loses to Jack Hermansson decision, and then loses a split decision to Jan Blachowicz at 205 pounds. You can see it from the graphic that's going to come up. I have him listed as 205 and then an asterisk because that was his last weigh-in. Coming back down to middleweight, there's a lot of weird things for me for Jacare in this fight. One, he tried out 205 and didn't like it, so now he's back at middleweight. Why? It's weird to be this late in your career to do that. Jacare training out of, what's it called? Jacare BJJ?
It's
Souza
a personalized
BJJ?
gym.
But it's kind of like his gym. Kind of like Tony Ferguson or co-main event from Snap Down. But that's another weird thing. Jacare's bounced around from camps. He's done the Fusion XL. Matt Scroy, former, minor league fighter in hockey. He coaches there. But it's just one of those ones where late in his career, he's kind of gone to Florida. He's found some success. He had that win against Derek Brunson, so I'd like to talk about that just quickly because that was supposed to be Brunson's coming out party. It was at home. It was in the main event. Jacare beat the piss out of him.
In his hometown, too, which was the worst part. And it was a rematch. Of course, people remember Jacare knocked him out back in Strikeforce, but it was a very different Derek Brunson than the first time they fought. And Jacare was having none of it. He basically marched him down like a Terminator, kicked him in the head, and beat him up with some really nice ground and pound. It was a phenomenal performance, but I do think that was the last time we saw Jacare. Like, we've seen Ronaldo Souza out there a few times since then, but we haven't seen this same Jacare. And the first performance that made me a little concerned for Jacare at middleweight was the Robert Whittaker one. And a lot of people remember that fight. That was Robert Whittaker's coming out party. A lot of people like to point to the first Yoel fight, but he wouldn't have got that first Yoel fight for the title if he didn't knock out Jacare Souza. And in that fight, it was very odd because Souza, you know what you're going to get. He's probably the best, well, he's in that top 5 kind of S tier, if you will, jiu-jitsu practitioners in MMA. Robert Whittaker just threw him off his back, beat him up on the feet really, really bad, and the speed was a problem for Jacare, and I do think that's been the story of his career. If Jacare hits you, you are going down. He's super heavy-handed. He has very developed striking for a guy who is a BJJ ace from a lot of the guys. We talk about it a lot. They're those big looping shots. Jacare throws the looping shots, but he is very technical with them. He likes that left hook to the body, too. We see that a lot. We saw that a lot in the Chris Weidman fight, of course. The problem with some of those techniques are they leave him open to get hit, and he's been rocked a lot lately. Jack Hermanson was able to rock him. Jan Blachowicz rocked him. Chris Weidman was. Kelvin Gastelum also dropped him. He's had this sort of weird secondary part of his career. I'll just say sort of the back nine, if you will, where he can't take shots the same way that he used to be able to, but he still fights in the same way that he did, where he is open to eating damage. And that concerns me against a guy like Kevin Holland. You are going to have to close the range at a certain point against Holland, and you're going to be walking through a lot of those dangerous straight shots, the kicks of Holland, the knees of Holland. You just have to get through a lot of those weapons before you can go to take Kevin Holland to the ground. Because I don't expect Jacare Souza to try to stand with Kevin Holland for 15 minutes. I think if Brendan Allen could submit Kevin Holland, and nothing against Kevin Holland's grappling, I do think he's a phenomenal grappler. But if Brendan Allen, who is a very physical grappler, can get to Kevin Holland on the ground, I assume Jacare Souza would be able to as well. Jacare, I think he's going to be more grapple heavy in this fight than we have seen him for a very long time. I know in the Chris Weidman fight, that did sort of devolve into one of those, well, we're both really good at grappling, let's strike for 15 minutes fights. But you go to the Jan Blachowicz fight, there just wasn't a lot of activity. It was a lot of Jacare following Blachowicz around the cage. He would try to use his boxing, but he would never really commit to it. Because when he did, Blachowicz would hit him with a couple quick shots, get his back off the cage, and then it was just kind of rinse and repeat for 25 minutes. So Jacare was rewarded for his cage presence in that fight, whereas I don't really think he fought all that well in that fight. I know it's a weird distinction to make, but I do think that's an important point to bring up.
And it's funny because, you know, there's going to be a lot of people out there, and feel free to comment this if you want, but he just lost a split decision to your now champ at 205, so he's going to beat Kevin Holland, right? Well, Kevin Holland right now is the favorite in this one. He opened a minus 175. He's now minus 135 average on best fight odds. So the money is coming in on Jacare, who opened a plus 135, is now to plus 110. If we look at the total Topology votes, Matt, 805 total, 68% going with Holland, 54% having to win by decision, 37% of the voters having to win by knockout. It's a tricky one because Jacare in his last fight really chasing Blachowicz, really pushing him up against the cage, not really doing a whole lot. He won on cage presence, and that's probably how he got some of the votes and some of the, the judges on his side. But overall, wasn't a very impressive performance.
No, it does look like age has caught up to Jacare. We're not really seeing the same fighter that we did see fight to a split decision with Yoel Romero that a lot of people thought he won. Or the same fighter that did fight Luke Rockhold all the way back in Strikeforce. Like,
I thought he beat Kelvin Gastelum not that long
exactly,
ago.
And that fight wasn't that long ago. Or at least in your memory it wasn't. It's just the fact that Jacare hasn't been all that consistent in the cage as of late. He has been taking quite a bit of time off in between fights. I mean, geez, it's been a year since his last fight. All those signs aren't very promising, but I'm going to do a bit of a wild card. All week long, all day long, I've been thinking Kevin Holland's going to win this fight, but I really do believe if Jacare goes out there with that wrestling-heavy game plan, if he goes out there with a more grappling mindset, I think he can win this fight. Not only do I think he can win this fight, I'm actually going to make that my official prediction. I think if Jacare goes out there and uses his wrestling, the wrestling's something that Jacare doesn't get enough credit for. He is one of the better jiu-jitsu aces in the wrestling department. I know that's the thing that a lot of jiu-jitsu practitioners, they're not great at the wrestling. It is the transition that they struggle with. But with Jacare, he has really good head and arm throws. He has good wrestling himself. And with a guy like Kevin Holland, I can see Jacare overpowering him, especially early on in the fight. And once the fight does hit the mat, I mean, Jacare is going to go through most guys like warm knife through butter. So I am going to pick Jacare, although not a confident pick. And for the division's sake, I kind of hope Kevin Holland wins.
This seems like one of those trap card type of fights where Kevin Holland is expected to win. He's on a win streak. He's a young guy. He's exciting. And then Jacare goes out there and takes the wind out of his sails. And I feel the same way about this fight. Because if you look at the win streak Kevin Holland's on, Anthony Hernandez, what kind of a ripple has he caused in middleweight since coming in off Contender Series? Nothing. Joaquin Buckley, okay, that's an outlier, but Buckley was coming in on incredibly short notice, and he put on a good account of himself in that fight, even though he got finished. Darren Stewart is a good wrestler. Holland won that fight by split decision. That's 2 months ago, and then he fights a month ago against Charlie Ontiveros, and Ontiveros gets hurt, and he's not even UFC caliber, fighting up a weight class. So for Holland, the things that I don't like, the level of competition, the struggle against Darren Stewart, and then the fact that, again, say what you will about the layoff, I guess, that he's on right now, but he was originally supposed to take on Jack Hermanson in a 5-round fight, albeit on short notice, but that was the fight he was scheduled for. What are you going to get ready for with Jack Hermanson? I know Hermanson beat Souza. Let's not play MMA math, but if you get 100% Jack Hermanson, doesn't have a broken orbital or a broken toe, what do you have to plan for?
You got to plan for the kicks, the output, and the wrestling. And the weird thing, though, is you don't really have to get ready for the same type of grappling that Jacare is going to bring to the table. Jack Hermanson is a phenomenal grappler, but you're dealing with someone who, if you play a lot of 2K, there's gold badges and then there's Hall of Fame badges. And Jacare's got himself a Hall of Fame badge in Jiu-Jitsu, where that most guys, really in the UFC, have Jacare's forgot more about Jiu-Jitsu than Kevin Holland probably knows. And I feel comfortable saying that. Like, that's the level of grappling that we're dealing with a guy like Jacare.
So for Jacare, you have the power wrestling. He's the type of guy that can work a double leg, work you up against the cage, especially at 85, less so at 205, especially against a guy like Blachowicz. So for Jacare, a lot of things that I actually strangely like in this fight. Listen, age is going to come into it, and I'm going to have to wait until these guys step on the scale before I can really make the final nail in the coffin official prediction. But right now, yeah, I'm going with the underdog, oddly enough, in Jacare Souza to get the win. We're both in agreement on this one. Let us know what you're thinking below in the comments section. Have we lost our minds? Are we absolutely insane? We're both going with Jacare Souza. Really looking forward to this card. We have a fellow Brazilian in the main event, Deiveson Figueiredo, taking on Brandon Moreno for that flyweight gold. So, as we always say with Fight Night Picks, Matt, let's get into it.